Assalamu alaikum, ladies and gentlemen. If you remember, in the last session, we had been discussing motivation as well as what are the moderators or influences that have an impact on the level of motivation. For example, we discussed the ability to buy, the opportunities that we have, as well as the riskiness of the factors. And then we discussed how can we reduce riskiness. Now, today, we are going to start a lecture on personality. Personality has been studied now for a long time with the point of view that it is assumed that people tend to buy products which fit with their own personalities. And therefore, marketers tend to not only use personality factors in trying to promote their products, but also try and produce products which will fit in with a person's personality. For example, we see there is an ad for Harley-Davidson where the punchline is that God created us equal, but it is up to us to be different. Now, what they are trying to promote is the personality of innovativeness, or individuality as a person who is totally different, would like to do it differently. On the other hand, Audi, another car manufacturers, they normally tend to use the concept of, another concept of innovativeness, which means we never follow, which means we tend to do things first. We are the ones who come in the beginning. So that is the kind of personality that we will be talking about. If you recall, and if you've seen in your personal lives, you find people tend to say, कि ये तो पहले से ही गुस्सा करने वाला शख्स है. That means they tend to tell you that a person's personality has a continuity in it, and people tend to show the same personality over a period of time. So today, we will be discussing not only what is personality, but we will also discuss various theories which are very important in this particular field. Then we will also see how research has been carried out in this field and how and what are the implications of personality research in terms of consumer behavior. Finally, we might also try and look at brand personality, but that will be if we have time. Otherwise, we will take that particular section of the chapter, section of this particular topic in the next session. What we have to understand and we have to realize that people have certain personality traits. Now, trait is a particular characteristic, it's something that we can define a person by. For example, aggressiveness, this is a particular trait, a person who is insecure is another personality trait. So people have been trying to understand what are the logical impacts of a personality, of a person's inner frame on the choices they make in terms of the various products they buy, when they buy them, how they buy them, and how they consume them. I recall there is a particular ad which relates to, let's say, people who eat snacks. Now, in this frame, there's research has been undertaken, and it has been discovered that people who tend to have a particular snack like chips have a particular characteristics which are different from those people who tend to eat pretzels. Or there is research which has been undertaken in terms of people who have soup. Now, there are different kinds of soup. You can have noodle soup, you can have tomato soup, you can have chili soup. And according to that research, it has again come to the conclusion that each person or a particular type of personality tends to go for a particular type of soup also. Now, given these important considerations, and the research is continuing in this field, we will try and look at the major aspects of personality and its theory. But before we go into the actual theories, for example, we would like to see how researchers have approached the concept of personality. There are certain researchers who have suggested that there are two, or what you call dual impact on an individual's personality. That is how personality comes about. In their opinion, it is basically hereditary. Hereditary, it means khandani hai. And with that, childhood experiences are also combined together to create what will become a person's personality at the later stage. Some people suggest, there is another group who suggests that no, it is more or less the social frame within which a person lives and experiences his life, which creates a person's personality. Further, there are people who tend to suggest that personality may not change because it is a very enduring kind of thing. But there are other people who tend to suggest that people do change their personalities, but only do that if they suffer or they go through some life-changing experiences. For example, a birth of a child, death of a parent, or so on and so forth, tends to bring changes in a person's known personality. The issue that marketers tend to remember, or should remember, that personalities have similarities. The logic is to try and again understand, we have discussed that quite often, that each consumer is different from another consumer. But that is in the overall frame. See, there is an overall frame of an individual who will totally be different from another. But within the person's frame, there are certain characteristics, certain qualities which may be similar to all the other, and that is why we can have what we call segments. Otherwise, if every trait, every characteristic would be totally different and there would be no similarity between two people, we would not be able to have segmentation, which is very critical in our strategy, in marketing strategy. So what we tend to do is, or what marketers tend to do is, in terms of personality, to pick any one single trait and then see a group of people who have similar traits, and then they use these traits for the purposes of promoting their products. They may even go and develop products for a particular category or a particular personality characteristic, and so on and so forth. Now, on the other side, we also tend to understand that research can be undertaken in terms of personality as an overall shape of a person, overall individual as it is. Or we can also start thinking in terms of single trait factors. Now, where single traits come into position, we have a number of theories around it. Having given you a broad framework on what is personality or how personality research takes place, let's try and define this concept of personality. Personality is an individual inner characteristic, which is inside the human being. It's an inner characteristic which tends to or helps in differentiating this individual from all the other around him. This is what we will call a personality trait. That is something which is inside the human being, which tries to differentiate or which can be identified and help differentiate that person from the other people. Like I said, we do understand that as an overall personality, people are always different. But when we look at single trait within the personality frame, it is possible that we can find a number of people with the same trait, and that is what will bring us to the logic of how to approach this group of people who have this single trait in mind, and keeping that in mind. And I've already given you an example of, let's say, the Harley-Davidson. There they approach people who are individualistic in their thinking, who tend to be out of the norm, out of the normal people. So that is why they gave that slogan that God made us equal, which means God made us all equal. but then it is up to us to be individuals. And it's the same with the other example that I gave. Now, having talked about this, let's look at where did the research or theory start from. Basically, as we discussed in terms of motivation and psychoanalytical research or consumer segmentation, we discussed that the problem was Freud. He was the person who actually started looking at people's personalities, and it was his basic concept that every individual has certain inner factors that he is not even aware of, which tends to provide basic motivation for his behavior. He actually developed the concept that every individual's personality is based on his childhood experiences. Now, and he suggested that as people pass through their childhood, as they go along through their childhood and as they grow up over 4 or 5 stages of childhood, and how they negotiate these childhood experiences, बच्चों के experience होते हैं, and according to Freud, जैसे जैसे बच्चा अपने उन experience से सबक हासिल करता है, it creates his personality. And therefore, his logic has been that it all tends to be based on an individual's childhood experiences which the child has. Now, before we go into the theories of personality, we will try and understand the nature of personality. Now, there are 3 factors in the what we consider as the nature of personality. The first factor is that personality creates differences between people, and there are traits which are considered to be totally different from one to the other. Second is that personality is considered to be enduring. It has to be lasting for the simple reason that if it was not, then we will never be able to have segments, because if it would change rapidly, then we will not be able to have similar factors or similar personality frames to be there for a longer period of time, which can be used by the marketers. And we said personality helps people to segment the market as well as to create promotional campaigns. The third part is that people do change, and we will see where the factors are that brings these changes into position. Now, as I said, that the personality is obviously individualistic. Every person would be different from one another, so that it will help in trying to target the appropriate groups. A good example is low risk takers against high risk takers. Now, obviously, people who are high risk takers will be more relevant in terms of being promoted concepts which are adventurous. On the other side of the picture, there are low risk takers who will avoid anything of excitement. And we will, when we look at the various trait theories, we will try and figure out how these have an impact on our logic. Now, the second aspect is that it is continuity. There is a continuity in the behavior of personality. They are enduring, and that is how we will be able to use them over a period of time. If it was not so, it will become very difficult for us to use these personality traits in terms of marketing applications or marketing implications. Third is that personalities do change. Now, in our case, personalities we consider, there is a contradiction if you look at it. On one side, we say personalities are enduring, they are consistent. On the other side, now we are saying that personalities can change. The point is that personalities do not change in the norm, and marketers cannot do that job. They cannot change personalities. However, certain environmental conditions may cause a person to change his behavior or change their personalities over a period of time. According to research, it could happen in a number of ways. Now, the first is because of certain significant events that take place in a person's life. Marriage, for example, when we move from bachelorhood to marriage status, it is possible that the person who used to be very adventurous, very outgoing, might become calm, might like to stay home and sit with his family and stay with his family and become grounded in that area. Now, on the other side of the picture, it could also happen because a loved one has lost his life. So that can have an impact on the way personalities are. The second concept of research suggests that people also change their personalities as they tend to mature in life. Not because of any life-changing events, but just because they are moving from one level to the other. For example, you look at people who are in the schools or colleges, and then the same student, when he becomes an employed person, he has got higher responsibilities. There are tendencies to change the personality. Finally, it is also being suggested that certain gender convergences are taking place. Sometime back in 1960, there were categorical differences between men and women. Now, over, let's say, 4 decades, which is close to about 2000, it has been suggested that women, as they have moved more and more into job positions, have tended to acquire certain personality traits which used to be considered only very relevant to the men. But the reason is that since they are working, they have to take decisions, they have to act in similar manners as men used to do, and that is going to continuously converge the women and the men towards the same frame of personalities. Though certain factors will stay totally different, but certain other traits will become similar in the sense that they will converge. Now, this is a very significant finding because at a point of time, a lady driving a car would drive for maybe shopping, for maybe going to some visit or whatever. But now, if you look at it, and if it's an employed woman, she would most probably would be rushing to the job or going to a meeting or going and picking up children from the school. Now, this creates a different kind of product requirement. The same old product may not be necessary. If a woman has to go and travel short distances and has to park her car regularly, so it might require a different kind of a configuration in a car rather than a person who is going to travel with her husband and the husband drives or the driver drives. There will be totally different aspects to it. Now, keeping this in mind, let's look at a few personality theories. Now, one of the personality theories is what comes from Freud. I talked to you when we were talking about motivational frameworks, and I had suggested that some of the motivational framework comes from psychoanalytical areas, where Freud has been the leader. And I also discussed with you, Freud was doing research in looking at people who were disturbed, and because of their disturbed systems, they were behaving in a peculiar manner, not the normal manner. So he tried to understand why people do that. His consideration was typically like children or the child's growth. As a child grows over a period of time, he passes through certain age time frames, and it is his the way he responds to those times, the way he reacts and goes over these times, that creates or tries to bring about the kind of personality he will have at the older times or when he grows older. Now, remember also that this kind of research that Freud was doing was basically, let's say, dream interpretation. He used to try and look at dreams, why people dream in a particular manner. His concept was that whatever happens in a person's living life, subconsciously, those events have an impact on his brain, and those impacts or those unconscious feelings are shown in their dreams. Most of this research was qualitative. Now, since all this research was qualitative, it was more interpretive, what we call, and I've already discussed this in terms of research methods. When it is interpretive, it cannot be generalized to a larger group. Therefore, the theory from Freud really is related to the unconscious and drives that are from the unconscious mind, like I said. Therefore, but his theory has a lot of standing in social sciences. And like I said, there are arguments about the way it has been done that is qualitative and therefore not very generalizable. But his three features of the theory, they are very, very important. And what are those three features? Now, their three features is he suggests that in a human being, there are three types of forces which are operating. The first is what we call the id, ID. Okay, it's the id. And the second one is the superego. And the third is ego. Now, according to Sigmund Freud, he suggested that it is the intuitive or the instinctive behavior that a person demonstrates, and that instinctive behavior is totally out of control. What tends to happen is that those people who are driven because of the id behave without a secondary thought, and according to him, it is a collection of all the behaviors that comes out of a human character, which is totally instinctive with no thought. People tend to sometimes behave according to that framework. So it is totally uncontrolled. On the second side, he suggested on a continuum, the other side is superego. Now, what he suggested, superego, was a force which is operating inside the human being, but it relates to the norms, the values, and the customs which the person understands to be in the environment. So what is the tussle between the two? Because at the same time, a person is going to be moved by the id, which is instinctive behavior, which is totally in the sense of gratification. But on the other side, there is superego. Now, superego is what is generated out of the environment, the social life the person has. And it is the interpretation of this individual, and in terms of कि दुनिया क्या चाहती है, what is the requirements of the social class, social setup that he is in, and therefore this social class group tries to control the behavior of the id. So there is always a conflict. The person wants to go towards the id behavior, whereas the stop or the block is on what the environment or the social life requires out of him. Now, according to him, there was something also known as this ego. Now, according to him, ego is the mature part of the human being, which tends to balance the requirement of the id and also the superego. So ego behaves like a balancing point. It is through experience, through maturity, through knowledge, through learning, that the person tries to see what are the rights and the wrongs that is available in an environment, the ethical and the moral, and what is the demand of the id. And this ego tries to work between the two and tries to balance out the two requirements. Okay, now this was what was the Freudian framework, and this is how he approached it. The basic factors were, according to him, the unconscious is operating at the person's mind behind his behavior, and the person is always responding to these unconscious needs and desires. But they are the outcome of, according to him, the childhood passage, and every stage that he goes through, the child responds to the different stages in a different manner, and the way he handles these different stages brings about the kind of personality that the person has. Further, he suggested that there are certain inner drives which push the person to behave. There are three of them, like I said, the id, the superego, which is the interpretation of the environment according to the person, and then the ego, which tries to balance these two out. That was the basic frame given by Freud. However, like I told you, since it is qualitative research, it cannot be generalized. There are a lot of arguments against that. So we find that new, Freudians, they moved into position. They are more quantitatively oriented. That means they have indices or they have inventories. And according to those inventories, they try and figure out through empirical tests and empirical surveys, that where does this individual form or fall within the pattern that they have already accumulated. So, for example, if they wanted to check a person's riskiness approach, they would be able to classify two people, low risk or high risk. They can measure it. Similarly, people can be dogmatic or non-dogmatic. They can be measured again. So their research was basically related to individual traits or characteristics on the basis of which they were trying to classify personalities. And they were using either one trait or a few traits put together to be able to create that. For example, Alfred, I've mentioned it to you, he tried to look at personality in terms of how much feeling does that person has in trying to conform to a social frame, plus how he handles his insecurities. So his approach was basically trying to run between being appreciated by the people around him. Number two, he was trying to also secure himself against certain insecurities that the person felt. He is already looking at what he wants to do. So he is not aggressively running away, nor he is aggressively moving towards people. He stands alone. He does not bother about, his behavior is not related to any reactive systems in the sense that, let's say, look at the compliant behavior. Now, if you look at the ads that normally come in with compliant behavior, they will always show a setting where people are enjoying themselves and a person is trying to fit in with that system. Sometimes questions are asked, why haven't you bought this? Because everybody else has it. Now, this particular message tends to suggest that the person should fit in. On the other side, aggressiveness is a separate factor which shows a reaction to get away from people. And therefore, there are certain questions that you want to answer or people are asked. And normally people comment that I don't want to wear what somebody else wears, which is aggressively trying to separate away. And the reason for this aggressive behavior is that you do not want to be put together with another group. On the other side, a detached person is a person who doesn't bother whether people like it or whether people will think him separate. He does it because he is totally on his own and he finds total satisfaction, self-confidence, no insecurity within his system. Now, Karen therefore was trying to figure out the behavioral patterns which come out of individuals' reaction to other people. Given this, we now have to move towards, as I've discussed, that there are certain new Freudian theories and there are certain Freudian theories. The one neo-Freudian is what we also call the trait theory. Now, trait is a single characteristic which relates to an individual, and these characteristics tend to act as a differentiator between people. Remember, trait is single, so we are looking at singular factors. Now, we will be looking at a number of these trait theories, and I will try and explain each one as briefly as I can so that we can manage this in this session. Now, if you look at the slide, you will find that these are the few traits that we will be taking care of. These traits are, for example, consumer innovativeness, consumer materialism, and consumer ethnocentrism. These are the three things that we will try and look at. Briefly, consumer innovativeness tends to suggest the behavior of being first or being last in trying to purchase a product. Whereas materialism tends to look at consumption behavior. Some people tend to accumulate material. Some people tend to not bother about it and make their life easy. Finally, consumer ethnocentrism means what inclines us to buy a particular product from a particular nation. So it is more related to where the product has been made. Now, in terms of consumer innovativeness, we will see there is a list of 5 variables, and we will look at them singly. We will see dogmatism, we will look at social character, then we will look at need for uniqueness, which is also known as NOU. Then we have optimum stimulation level, which is also OSL. And then finally, novelty or variety-seeking behavior. Now, if we go to the first one, I've already discussed with you the innovativeness. And remember, this innovativeness has come about repeatedly in our previous lectures, going as far back as the VAL system, the VAL system, the Value, Activities, Lifestyle system, where we discussed a little bit on innovators. These are the people who we remember from that point who tend to be the first in trying new things, and that is why we consider them not to be particularly people who are brand loyal, because they are constantly trying new things and they're not scared of it. On the other extreme, we saw there were people who tend to be very loyal to the brands and they don't want to switch because of insecurities and so many other factors. So we have already discussed this. Now coming to dogmatism. Now, dogmatism is a frame which tries to look at a person's personality and his approach to how he receives new things, new information. How amenable is he to new characteristics or new products coming into the market. So there is a list of things that would be related to dogmatism concept. People who are dogmatic, they will always try and avoid any new information or any new characteristics which will disturb them. So their behavior is basically to avoid any product which has been introduced with the new features. Why? Because maybe there are so many reasons. They do not know how to handle this information. They are not aware of the frame of how to interpret this information. So they avoid anything new. And we find people who are very dogmatic. They do not even want to listen to a new idea. On the other side, the other extreme is non-dogmatic people. They are very open to new ideas, new thoughts, new concepts. So logic says that in marketing, if you want to introduce new products, new features, new variations, you will tend to send this information to people who are non-dogmatic. Second part is that the people who are dogmatic, their approach to promotion is very significant. For example, they do not tend to read information. They do not look at the basic concept of the ad, but they would like to look at the background or the peripherals of the ad, so or the model that is there. That influences them more than the listed or the written words, which will tend to provide them information. And that is why if we tend to approach a group of people who are more dogmatic in their approach, we would tend to use models, celebrities, people who are well known and well well honored, well respected, and they are used to promote products, new products particularly. On the other side, if the same product is being promoted to non-dogmatic, it will tend to have more content on product features, what are the quality of the product, what are the characteristics, whatever has been added new, and details are given because these people are more responsive to the details that come out of their life. So keeping this in mind, we now have one trait which is basically dogmatic covered. The second one that we will look at is basically the social frame, in which the researchers have come about and suggested that there are two types of people who respond to the social factors. One is inner directed and the other is other directed, which means that there are two categories or two extremes on which the inner directed people are the people who would behave on their own strength. They will not be driven by certain opinions or certain feelings of the other people. So they will tend to take action, buy products after assessing, analyzing information. So logic says that for inner directed people, we'll tend to give more information. If you try and see the dogmatic as well as the inner, they are more closer, but the differences are also very substantial. In terms of dogmatic, we had suggested that those people do not want to listen to anything. So they are to be influenced by well-respected models who would try and promote a new product. On the other side, We also talked about the non-dogmatic, so they are open to all kind of information. They would like to find information, take their own decision. They are not averse to new information. But social or inner-directed people are people who go inside, which means particularly, if you look at it, the undogmatic people can also find opinion from other people. So it's not that they will only analyze the information they have, or no, they would also like to get opinion from other people, so they will try and find opinion everywhere. However, the inner directed people are totally occupied by what they analyze and their response to the information is. So they will be totally coming from inside. On the other side, the other directed people, it's nothing to do with the kind of information, but the other directed people are the people who would try and buy a product which will not embarrass them, or which will help them fit into the environment or the social setting, or which will be approved by the people or friends that they have. So the other directed people look for approval from other people, whereas inner directed people do not look for approval, but they do it for their own sake. Dogmatic and non-dogmatic, they are more amenable. Sorry, the undogmatic are more amenable to information, processing, and so on. They can also talk to other people and get this information and then make a decision, whereas the dogmatic, they do not. They will try and be more comfortable with somebody telling them that this product is good. So it's on that basis that we are looking at this. Now, the third thing is the need for uniqueness. Now, this is another characteristic, which is, and remember that these are closely related to each other, but you can see the distinctions between them. Need for uniqueness is a requirement or a trait which tends to suggest that the person wants to stand out of the crowd. So he tends to behave in a manner which will help him stand out in terms of the dress that he wears. And research suggests that people who have got a high level of need for uniqueness will tend to not buy things which are normal, like Levi's jean. They will not buy that, not because of any other factor, but because they feel that everybody else is buying it. So they will tend to go in a different track altogether to stand out of the crowd and behave or show that they are very distinctive in their approach. After having finished this uniqueness factor, we will look at the optimal stimulation level. Now, this is basically people who are more attuned to sensation seeking. They tend to behave as if their life requires more and more sensations. So they want higher level of stimulation. A good example is, according to research, those people who have higher level of sensation requirements, they tend to like rock music, other than those people who tend to avoid sensation. They go for softer music. In the same situation, the optimal stimulation levels, their research also suggests a very important concept, and that is that, and this is related to people's lifestyle, okay? So what we are looking at is that people who have optimal stimulation levels, there is a link or a direct connection between the lifestyle they have, which means that if they want to clutter their life, some people are people who like to have things calm, simple. They don't want to clutter their lives. But on the other side, there are people who want excitement, who want higher levels of stimulation. So they want to bring new things which will clutter their life in various forms, maybe in terms of possessions, maybe in terms of the experiences they have, and so on and so forth. The logic behind this, or the implication, is that people who have a lifestyle which is equal to their OSL, which is optimal stimulation level, those people are normally very satisfied. So because whatever their stimulation level, the lifestyle they are living, if it's equal, they are happy, they would be very satisfied. But there could be a people whose OSL, whose optimal stimulation level is higher than his current lifestyle. This person will tend to become bored. Why? Because he will like to have more lifestyle which would be more stimulating. The third category of the people would be whose lifestyle is much higher than the optimal stimulation level or the OSL level. Now, these people are on the other side totally stressed out. If you think about it, give it a thought. If you were promoting a trip, let's say travel or recreational travel or going for weekend somewhere, now we will approach these two groups totally separately in the sense that a person whose lifestyle is below his OSL level, obviously we will try and promote him an exciting adventure, a trip where he can have a lot of exciting things to do, hang gliding, maybe skydiving, maybe bungee jumping, or so on and so forth. But on the other side, if the person's lifestyle is much higher than his OSL level, now this person can be approached by a kind of a vacation which is serene, which is comfortable, no excitement, stresses out the person, he relaxes in this vacation, he has calm beaches, and so on and so forth. So if you now look at the implications, you can see typically how these trait factors can be used very effectively in marketing and trying to develop products and offering products. Now, finally, in the trait category, we have what we call novelty or variety seeking. Do also remember that uniqueness, this optimal stimulation level, variety, and these, they're all similarly linked together and tends to combine with the consumer innovativeness. But like I said, you can look at consumer innovativeness as a single trait or as a collectiveness of all the traits. So in variety and novelty seeking behaviors, we again find the same kind of a thing. People who buy things not because they want them or they need them, but because they want to keep changing. So sometimes people buy toothpaste not because they want to or they have a reason or they have some benefit that is going to be delivered to them. They do it because they are bored with the old one and so they just need to change. Similarly, there are other kind of people or the second category of people who would not like to change their brands. So they will stick to the brand even if you are giving them or offering them a new thing. Now, this particular variety and novelty seeking, we will find that there are, according to research, 3 categories of novelty or variety seeking behavior. Now, again, if you look at the screen, we will see number 1, exploratory purchase behavior. The number 2 is vicarious exploration. And then the third one is use innovativeness. Now, the first one, exploratory, it tends to suggest that person wants to buy, like I told you the first time when I was discussing this variety seeking, they just want to explore some new products, not for any other purpose, but just because they are bored with their previous product. So they tend to buy new ones repeatedly just for keeping their novelty frame in motion. The second one that I suggest, or we have looked at the screen, is the vicarious one. Now, here people tend to deliberately do it because of a need to acquire things. So they are more, buying behavior is related to a specific need of collecting material. They would like to bring new things in, even though they may not be required, but it's just there. Their drive is to keep buying new things so that they can show people they have the latest things in their household, in their control, or in their life. The third one is use innovativeness. Now, this is a very interesting concept because it is related to high-tech products. Use innovativeness is where people tend to increase the number of things they can do with the same product. Now, in high technology product, and particularly keeping these kind of people in mind, you will find that the same product is then you add a new category or a new feature into it, or you give a product which can do a number of things. Why? Because this category of people tend to use the same appliance for a number of things. So they are innovative in terms of using the same product which is available, but they tend to buy products which will give them more features to control. Now, this is different from another group of people who would like to keep their life simple. They would stick to the product which is simple to manage and which only would do one or two things, and they are satisfied with this. But this category, use innovativeness, these people would like to have a product with more features, and this is normally related to the technical aspects of the product, or normally related to high technology product. Having finished this trait consideration, we go to the second category of consumer behavior or personality, which relates to, as we discussed, cognitive personality behaviors. Now, cognitive personality is typically composed of two groups, and one is cognitive. The second one is visualizers against verbalizers. We will try and look at it briefly because of the time, and then we will try and go further into it in the next class. But briefly, cognitive personalities are what we talk about, the thinking personalities. Now, naturally, and its implication is more in relation to the kind of promotional message there would be, or what will be incorporated in the promotional message. Thinking cognitive personalities are who think. So for thinking purposes, they need more information. They would like to find more information so that they can go over, analyze the whole thing on their own. So they are what we call deep thinkers kind of people. On the other side, we have, or the second category of people are the visualizers against the verbalizers. Now, this has got, again, implications, like I said, for the marketing or the promotional campaign that we have. The cognitive people are more interested in written words. They would be more concerned with what is written, and they will be more concerned with details of the product so they can carry out their own analysis and comparisons and do all sorts of things. But the second group, the visualizers against the verbalizers, now again, the visualizers are people who tend to like to get a visual impact developed for them regarding the product itself or its operation or its impact. Whereas the verbalizers would like to listen to somebody tell them what is going on. So they are not really concerned with the background of the information, but they are more concerned with what is being stated to them in terms of either written material or material communicated. But visualizers, they want to see things in front of them. So, for example, if you wanted to have this kind of a product which can show something being done, oven, maybe a microwave, you want to show them how a chicken can be cooked in it. So the visualizers would like to see this chicken being cooked in the microwave. But the verbalizers would like just somebody telling them how it can be done. These two considerations, therefore, have significant impact on the way messages are created and the way the content of the message would be. I think the time is now short, so I'll try and wrap up the discussion for today and then continue with the rest of the lecture, including the brand personality, in the next session. Today, what we have done is that we have tried to understand what is the definition of basically what is personality. Further, we have tried to also try and understand the various, the traits of personality or the characteristics of personality in terms of their being different. They create differences between people. They're being more continuity framed. They are, they continue. They have longer time frames. Third, they also tend to change. After this, we had discussed the various theories that we have. There are significantly three groups. One is related to what Sigmund Freud developed. The second group is what we call neo-Freudism, where the people who have had some objections to Freud's approach, they tend to see or do research in a different methodology or using a different method, mostly quantitative. So they try and see people within either the social setting or in the way they respond to the markets or they respond to their environment. And then we looked at the trait theory, which tends to suggest that traits can be either seen in single form or in the context of the new Freudians in terms of collective of a few traits. Now, after this, we had also gone through each one of them, and finally we came to the cognitive personality framework, which we suggested was part of the way the messages are communicated. So before I finish, what I'll tend to do is, rather than go into the consumption patterns in detail because of the shortage of time, I'll cover the consumer ethnocentrism. I talked to you about this, where I suggested that people, according to research, have a tendency to buy products based on their country of origin. Ethnocentricity basically means that you relate to the area that you belong to. For example, in the world, Japanese are more ethnocentristic in their approach. They would like to buy more Japanese products. Similarly, Mexicans tend to buy, and they are more ethnocentric. In the same sense, there are certain products, and remember that ethnocentrism relates to not only nationality or from where the brand comes or from where the product comes, but it also depends on the product itself. For example, there was a research or was done in Malaysia where it was determined that people tend to buy the jeans, the shoes, the shirts, etc. made in Malaysia, but they were more interested in buying sunglasses or watches that come from outside, which suggests two things. Again, the behavior of the consumer based on the country of origin. Second, based on the type of product. And this is similar all over the world. So we find that in some countries, ethnocentrism is of a higher level, which means that the marketers tend to promote their own national feelings in the words like be Pakistani, buy Pakistani. This concept comes from the logic of ethnocentrism. But like I said to you, please make sure you remember and understand that ethnocentrism is not only related to the country of origin, but also sometimes relates to products, because people have certain factors or certain feelings about various products. The logic also is that when people are low in information, when they are not aware of the type of quality of product itself, then we tend to bank ourselves more on the type of or the kind of country where it comes from. For example, we believe that the Germans have got very high technology, therefore any product comes from there is going to be considered to be of a higher technology. Now, this brings us to the end of the lecture. Let me recapitulate very quickly what we have discussed. We talked about personality, we talked about certain theories about personalities, and then we went into a number of traits which we looked at, and we finally concluded with ethnocentrism. Next time, I will try and pick up materialism, consumer materialism, and then link it up with brand personality, self-image, self-concept. Okay, with this we come to the end of the lecture. Thank you very much. Allah Hafiz.